talk about some kind of interesting topic. So we're getting the screen set up for sharing. We're always available online on the DUUC website, and if you like something about it, want to hear a repeat a part of the talk, you're more than welcome to get onto the DUUC website, and under adult programs you can click onto that. I know some people are here that often are teaching at the kids at this time, and so they can't see the programs here right now, and then they see them later. So you're always welcome to look back at it too. So without any further ado, Pat's got a lot to cover to keep us all eating sustainably. And as long as there's pizza in front of me, I'm pretty good at eating sustainably for quite a while. And but I think she's got another topic in mind. And so thanks a lot, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. As said, I'm very new to the church, and I'm very excited to be in the church and planning to join it as a member probably this month. So just recently, I think under the new administration, I've become particularly concerned about ways in which I can have some positive impact, because I feel sort of helpless about what's going on in our country. And one of the things I thought about was finding out more about how I'm eating and how that impacts the world, the environment. So I decided to look into that, and I just took the leap of suggesting that I give a talk about that, which is a little bit wild because I haven't given a talk in 35 years, and I've only given a couple in my life, and I have not used PowerPoint until 2 or 3 weeks ago. So this is a pretty crazy thing for me to do, but I'm looking forward to sharing what I found out, which not all the topics exactly match up with a blurb I found when I just reviewed my blurb, but we might mention a few of those things after finishing the slides that I did prepare. So, I'd like to share what I've got. I hope I can do it clearly and be useful to you. So I decided after starting to read about it that I better narrow the topic down rather than talking about every aspect of the environment and what we eat, that it was better to narrow it down to something more manageable, and I decided to work on just the greenhouse gas impact of the food system. So first we'll talk about the food system itself and how greenhouse gases are created from production through disposal of unwanted food. Then talk a little bit about what we as individuals can do with our eating habits, and then maybe talk a little bit, if we have time, about some political issues and systemic issues that we could address. So it's thought that the food system generates 1/3 of the greenhouse gases every year. And that's not, of course, including other environmental impacts of the food system. And we have a slide here, the greenhouse gases annually created by humans, and in terms of CO2 equivalents, since the potency of different gases depends on, varies. So although carbon dioxide is 75% of the CO2 equivalents, we have 16% from methane, 6% from nitrous oxide, and about 2% from other greenhouse gases. And I said there's different potency. Carbon dioxide, of course, is potency. It's given the number 1, and then methane is about 28 times, and nitrous oxide about 262 times potency, and the HFCs that are used in refrigeration about 500 to 5,000 times the potency of carbon dioxide in terms of global warming potential. So as we look at the food system, it's thought that 71% comes from production and 29% comes from other aspects of the food system than production. This is probably an underestimate of the amount in on the side of things that are not production, because in the United States, it's actually estimated that 35% of our edible food is wasted. So that would be a tremendously different pie chart if we considered that. And also some of the issues related to the cold chain and refrigeration may also modify that pie chart. Well, there's various ways to get food, and one is crops. One of the biggest issues in farming for crops is the nitrous oxide produced. Most of the nitrous oxide is produced from the work of microbes in the soil on synthetic fertilizer. Agriculture is considered to be the cause of 70% of the annual nitrous oxide production in the world. Carbon dioxide, of course, is produced by farm operations and making machinery and so forth, but in addition to that, in many parts of the world, there's substantial loss of carbon sink due to changing the use of land that was maybe a forest. Also, tilling the soil is thought to reduce carbon dioxide, and that particular method of farming may be not as helpful for greenhouse gases. Another thing that produces carbon dioxide in crop farming is the actual production of fertilizer. 1 or 2% of the carbon dioxide produced per year by humans is thought to be from the process of going through making ammonia and making synthetic fertilizer. On the other hand, methane is not a major gas produced by crop farming except for rice cultivation. Anything involved with growing in wet circumstances tends to produce methane. Rice cultivation is thought to produce 8% of the annual methane production by human activities. So how about animal husbandry? We have to think about the feed given to the cattle with grain or silage when they're not grazing themselves. And that, of course, involves all the costs in terms of greenhouse gases that you generate by crop farming. And then there's, of course, carbon dioxide from the normal activities of your farm and shipping your feed and so forth. Also, in many parts of the world, there's a huge impact in terms of losing the carbon sink by deforestation. That's not considered to be a significant issue here in the United States. There's not a lot of nitrous oxide. It's not considered to be a major part of that, although there's produced from manure. On the other hand, a big issue is methane. Methane is produced in all manure. It's produced in chicken litter, but and overall, in manure is considered to contribute 8% of the total methane per year from human activity. But the big one is the cows belching. The enteric methane that is belched out and therefore cannot be sequestered and reused by farmers is a huge. One cow can belch out 220 pounds of methane a year. And that's from the UC Davis. The cows, ruminants kept by humans, apparently could contribute just by belching 27% of the annual methane production from human activity. They can sequester from the methane, and actually sometimes it breaks even financially to use fancy biogas digesters to sequester from the manure. But unfortunately, you can't put a mask on the cows and try to collect the methane. So how about catching fish? Well, of course, there's fuel use in order to try to catch fish. There's refrigeration costs in fuel, and there's also HFCs used in refrigeration. There's been a lot of alarm very recently, however, about one other aspect, because there is a carbon pump where carbon is sequestered at the bottom of the sea. And trawlers, as seen up in the left corner, you can't see very well, drag nets across the bottom of the sea and have gadgets to make sure they dig into the sediment and stir everything up as they try to catch everything from the bottom. There's other kinds of trawlers that catch the middle fish. They're often the smaller fish. A lot of the trawlers that catch food that we like, the bigger fish, sometimes some of those fish are caught by bottom trawlers. The problem with this is the carbon sequestration, the interruption with the carbon sequestration. Recent analysis has come up with an estimate that the disturbance of the sediment by bottom trawlers may actually triple the previous estimated carbon, triple the previous, is that, I wasn't sure if I was too loud or was too close. Is this about right? The impact on increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide by this disturbance of the sediment may actually triple the greenhouse gas impact of the entire fishing industry, rather than not even just to the impact of the trawlers. What you see at the bottom, as you might guess, in the middle of that little yellow circle is a tiny white cross. That tiny white cross is a double-rigged trawler in the Gulf of Mexico, and behind it is a plume of sediment that is stirring up. Trawlers may discard half of their catch, too. So another option is to do fish farming or aquaculture. Aquaculture produces nearly half of the global annual fish or seafood currently, and more than half of the seafood that we eat here in the United States. There's three ways they can do the aquaculture, either with cages in the water, or with ponds, or with purpose-built structures with filtration and aeration that are independent of natural bodies of water. There's some unique problems with cage farming. Some countries do it in a very irresponsible way. It's one of the reasons why it may be worthwhile getting into some of the laborious and complicated issues of studying advice about where to get your fish and seafood. The feed used for these fish often is smaller fish, which has to be fished for, with all the costs of the fishing. Also, the great majority of the entire fishing industry, when people go out and catch fish, is used for feed. A lot of it for aquaculture, some of it for animals, which leaves new problems in terms of having enough food left for the predators in the ocean that are wild. But they also use crops, so both you end up causing the emissions both from the crop farming and from the fishing in order to feed these fish. On site, at the farm, also methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide are produced. There's partly due to the excess feed that's there, there's poop from the fish, So there's more gases emitted. Also, in some parts of the world, particularly in Asia, I believe, there's a substantial problem with cage farming causing a loss of carbon sink from things like destroying mangrove forests. So we've talked about different ways to get some food. So one thing is maybe we should buy locally, because it seems like food may come a long distance. So how far does food come to our plates? How about people put up their hands if they think the average miles to our plates in the United States is 500 miles? 1,000 miles? Okay, a few hands. 1,500? Lots of hands. And 2,000. Okay. Well, we got a very educated group. It's 1,500, and I think maybe 1,600 is the average distance food comes to our plates in the United States. So you'd think maybe it would be a really good idea to buy local. So how do we buy local? Here's the when the Illinois foods are in season, the produce. Generally, you can't read any of these, but generally, except for like onions, there's like 3 to 4 months, some 5 months, some 2, a few 6. So there's a lot of the year where food is not in season in Illinois or in other states with a similar climate nearby. So can you explain the colors? Each color actually represents a different particular item. It's like peas, broccoli, and so forth. They just are so that you can identify them when you're reading them close enough to see the names of the foods. So let's say tomatoes won't be in season until like May or something. So what are we going to do if we want a tomato in the wintertime? Should we buy a tomato from Mexico, or should we buy a tomato from Canada? Well, the tomato from Canada is growing in a hothouse, and the best guess that I was able to find from experts is that it's better to buy the tomato from Mexico. On the other hand, if you want a raspberry in the middle of the winter, maybe you should try to find something raspberry flavored, like a syrup or something, because the raspberries are so fragile that they might have been flown in. This chart, you can't bring it, I see it, you can see better than I can the top of the chart. This chart, these charts are to try to figure out the cost of the transportation. On the left is the kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ton kilometer, that is the carbon dioxide per unit of weight, per unit of distance of different methods of transportation, of shipping your food. On the left, shipping, then road, train, and air. The green is at ambient temperature. There's not a lot published about the extra cost from the cold chain, but I did find one reference specifically about that, breaking it down according to the type of transportation. Shipping is 1/100th the cost per mile of air shipping, using the true ship, a boat, and train is 1/20th. The road transportation and trucks is about 1/6 for ambient temperature. The one thing that did not seem to be taken into consideration in some of the overall estimates that I had looked at of whether you should be concerned about the food miles of your food, is that I found one estimate that was wide-ranging about the cost of the emissions cost of truck transport when it's chilled, the refrigerated trucks. That one indicated it could be maybe the same as ambient temperature, which seemed a little weird, or it could be as much as 3 times. So if it were 3 times, it would be half of the air. So I just sort of fudged it and said, put it in halfway, and I said it was like double the cost of ambient. But that's very, very uncertain. There seems to be, other people claim to have already incorporated the cost of the cold chain. So this is atypical that the process of chilling the food during the transport is listed so high with truck transportation. And then over on the right, we've got the percentage of our food that travels by different methods. And ship is 60%, road is 30%, rail is 10%, and there's a minuscule amount by air. Looking at these, most of the articles I saw just looked pretty much at the ambient or estimated a smaller cold chain impact, and they basically consider the truck transportation to be not a major concern, and sort of like applaud the fact that most of our stuff goes by ship. But it's a little uncertain how much we should be concerned about the truck transportation. Yes?
If you consider shipping, train, air, those all go into terminals, and then trucks take it the rest of the way.
Yeah, they're including that in terms of these estimates of, it goes by ship and it gets transferred and so forth. My understanding is the estimates do include that. Hopefully.
So just based on my experience, which admittedly was 20 years ago as a frozen specialist at a grocery store, it's possible that some of that wide variation that you're seeing in the CO2 for road shipping is dependent on whether they're using dry ice as an additional coolant rather than just using a refrigerator run off of a generator in the truck. Because we would get things that would be on an unrefrigerated truck, but they would be, or in a partially refrigerated truck where there's a refrigerator at one end and all the cold stuff is at that end buried in dry ice, and then there's a insulating panel, and then the rest of the truck is at ambient.
It's
So it gets
really complicated when you get into the details, as you said, with the transfer and the mixture of different methods and so forth, and then what happens in terms of loss of cooling during that procedure, and how do you make up for that with extra cooling and so forth. So it turns out that very little is transferred by plane, but very high value, very perishable items tend to be sent by plane. Asparagus, very fragile berries, sometimes fish that's not frozen needs to be sent by plane. Apparently the UK gets its green beans by plane from Kenya. So the published predicted cost of the final transportation from production to your home, what we think of as the food miles, is the emissions cost is considered to be about 5% of the total, though there's some other people are saying if you really include that refrigeration, maybe it's 10% of the total. So should you buy local? Should you grow your own? People have tried to estimate this. The actually big ag is very, very efficient. One study looked at an estimate of the efficiency in terms of greenhouse gases of like farms trucking small loads of food to farmers markets, and came up with a conclusion that that was worse in terms of emissions than the long-distance transport. But on the other hand, that if you had a local, regional co-op of farms delivering large shipments to institutions, that would be a savings on emissions. In terms of growing your own, there was a study of multiple, I think 12 or more community gardens done in gardens in Europe and in the United States. Unfortunately, the researchers came to the conclusion that those farms were like 8 times worse than going to the store. Maybe not for other issues, but for greenhouse gases. They said partly because of things like counting the cost of the infrastructure. I don't know, maybe they put up sheds and raised beds. I don't know how they got that much infrastructure, but and that could be sort of spread out over years, you'd think. I hope they took that into consideration. But the biggest impact was that they were composting wrong. They were producing methane from their gardens. So how about a private garden? If you had your own garden in the backyard, you probably wouldn't need a lot of infrastructure for it. And you could probably compost properly, especially since there's so many people out here who would guide you if you don't already know. And so that probably is a beneficial way in terms of the global warming to get your food. A real big issue is the refrigerants in the cold chain. There's more and more alarm about that, just as there is about bottom trawlers. We got rid of CFCs because they were affecting the ozone layer, but we substituted HFCs and similar refrigerant, evaporative refrigerants. They have a low ozone depletion potential, but still a very high global warming potential, from 500 to 1,000 in CO2 equivalents. If they were all kept under control and away from the atmosphere, it wouldn't be so bad. But it's estimated that 25% of the refrigerant in refrigerated trucks and 25% of the refrigerant in grocery stores is leaked every year. So what should we have on our menu? Maybe it's more important than where it comes from. There's a slight uncertainty about that, but it looks like maybe it's more important what we actually eat. You probably have seen some charts like this before. This is very busy, and I tried to make the individual foods more visible by typing them down the middle. These are the greenhouse gases per unit of protein, for 100 milligrams of protein of different foods. The big one up top, as you probably know, is beef at 50, and the next one after that is almost 20% of that, which is the farm prawns. Or cheese is one of the highest foods other than beef, and that's about 20% of the impact of beef per unit of protein. So the dairy products, cheese and milk, are very high. Chicken is actually substantially better than than chicken. Excuse me, chicken is substantially better than cheese. This is all in terms of global warming. There are a lot of other issues to consider, including animal welfare and so forth. But when you get down to things like dried beans and nuts, we're talking maybe 1/150th, 100th of the impact of beef. I tried to do my own calculation. It came out with a slightly different ratio, but same qualitatively, if not quantitatively, and found that under my calculations, a 4.7 ounce hamburger, which is a sort of a reasonable size hamburger, could cost 1.37 gallons of gas, and same 25 milligrams of protein could be obtained from 110 grams of dried peas and cost less than 4 ounces of gas. So, not surprising, many of us probably already had this idea that a beef makes a big difference, and being a vegan is an enormous benefit for the world. We have on the left vegan, then vegetarian, then fish eater, then a low meat eater, and then somebody eats a lot of beef, which is traditionally what most Americans have done. Another big issue with global warming is with all the emissions generated by producing food, the waste of edible food that occurs. Currently in the United States, our waste of edible food at restaurants is going up. Of course, sometimes they have food at the end of the day they have trouble getting rid of while it's still good, but there's also the waste just left by customers. And I read that young people are just generally not interested in taking the food home, they just leave it. And our restaurant waste is estimated at 35% of our edible food. And not me, but they also estimate that the home waste is 35%, which is completely shocking to me. Now, one reason for home waste is the food date codes that confuse people. Use by or freeze by are appropriate codes if they're used correctly. They are supposed to mean that this food might actually develop too many germs if you don't use it by then. And that's supposed to apply to things like raw chicken. Sell by is not supposed to be even seen by the customer. It's supposed to be an internal thing with the producers and the store where it's displayed. Best if used by only means that they're sort of guaranteeing that this would be perfect if you use it by this time. It has nothing to do with safety. So you're supposed to just, best if used by means take a look at it before you eat it, or taste it before you serve it to your guests. I recently found a package from the pandemic or something that was like best if used by 2020, of a little oatmeal packet. So I said, oh, that sounds like it might be good. So I ate it, and it was absolutely delicious. It had not, it hadn't deteriorated in any way. So never worry about best if used by. Worry about what it looks like, what it smells like. Maybe you should worry about mixed packages of salad, because they are higher risk for germs just because of the fact that they come from many different farms, and every different farm there's another chance that it's contaminated. But not really the date a concern there. It's more examine. I even discovered that when the romaine lettuce has a little pink line down the side, it's not germs. When the rib is pink. So you could just decide if you enjoy eating it. Yes?
Sometimes the best if used by is based on the container leaching into the product.
Can you give an example? Sometimes it's based on, best if used by is based on the container. Can you give me an example?
Sure, if you have bottled water at home, it's probably best if used by, just because the water, some of the plastics will leach into the water. It's not going to hurt you, but you may taste the difference.
Now, yeah. So when we're shopping for food, you have to sort of decide how good are you at using up dribs and drabs of stuff. You know, are you a creative person? Do you say, okay, there's a little bit of a carrot, there's a little bit of a few mushrooms, half an onion, half an apple or something. Can I do something with this and be creative and have fun with it and use it all up? Or are you the kind of person who says, I use this much for my recipe and there's this other stuff left over and I either don't know what to do with it, or I just don't have the energy, or I don't want to look up a recipe, it's going to rot. If so, you should probably be planning your recipes more so that you buy the amount that you need for your recipe. Getting a plan with your friends to give away the food that you get discouraged about. We shouldn't have a culture, you should have a culture saying, hey, I've got this stuff, do you want it? Also, keeping a plan to keep your leftovers, if you will use them, in a way that's convenient, easy to see, quick to microwave. You know, don't leave them in your take-home container, put them in a glass container. They look good and they can be microwaved in a few seconds. So trying to think about ways to prevent waste. Even one researcher even said that if you're really not good at using up your leftovers, you might be better off in terms of the environment to order one of those boxes where they have all the exact amounts of ingredients for your menu. It seems crazy because that's an individual inefficient thing, but the waste of food may be worse. So composting versus a landfill.
A question here.
How effective is rinsing stuff, like your veggies, maybe you put them away for a couple of days, now you want to use what's left over. Is that effective, or is that just kind of making you feel good?
I don't know. I don't rinse my stuff when I put them away unless I have it, feel like it. You know, sometimes I'll feel like it, but I'm not one to rinse and wash stuff much, so I may not be doing things properly. I don't know.
I think you don't really rinse things until you're ready to use them.
Right, but if you buy, like I buy a thing of veggies, I only want to use a quarter of them. I got 3/4 left. I have 3/4 left, so next time I come on, I put the veggies in the corner, run it under the faucet, shake them a few times for 30 seconds. Is that effective, or am I just fooling myself? I'm getting ready.
I think it's, at least it's harmless. You don't want to get them wet before you store them. That might,
Not before.
but after, I don't know the answer for after.
We've got a store specialist here.
Okay.
Right, so my more recent expertise is from the produce department. Grocery store tales today. So as far as using produce, I would say you always do want to wash it before you eat it because it comes in covered in dirt. It's a pretty dirty job working in produce. As far as if you've like washed it all, then you definitely want, if it's something like greens, like herbs or that sort of thing, you want to dry it well before you put it away. But you only need to wash it the once. So am I understanding correctly what you're asking about?
Well, usually it comes in a package, so I'll take a quarter out, wash a quarter, use it. The next time, take another quarter out, wash it. Use it.
Yeah, you want to wash each chunk of it before you use it.
But when I'm storing away, how long, I mean, kind of starts getting a little slimy, especially.
Slimy, you throw it. Slimy is when you throw it.
Slimy, you throw it, or if you're short on funds, then slimy, you wash off the slimy exterior, and then you trim the outer part of it and use the inside that's still good, but definitely check and make sure that inside's still good.
I was thinking slimy greens you throw. But
Slimy greens you
the
throw,
parts
yeah.
that are
Oh my
green,
goodness,
for
it's-
sure you throw. But yes, when I see some part of a, cauliflower or something that's bad, I'll try to trim.
Yeah, you can totally, you can trim off like a bad piece of cauliflower or whatever.
As a single person, because you buy things for the family for more. I need to buy a quantity for one, but you can't find quantity.
So a hack for that, you were just asking about like buying smaller quantities of greens,
Yes.
is make use of the salad bar, but don't get the things like the dressings, because that's where the margin is made, is in the toppings and the dressings that weigh more. If you need like a few ounces of salad, the cheapest way is to just get the greens from the salad bar, Because if you buy the 1 pound package and you're not gonna go through it, that's like the cheapest per ounce, but then you waste a lot of it. If you buy the 5 ounce package, then it gets really expensive per ounce. But if you go to a store that has a salad bar, you can get the exact same lettuce or lettuce mix or whatever, but you can get it at kind of, it's a little more per ounce than the 16 ounce, but you're not gonna waste it because you get exactly how much you need. I guess I'll stay around after for more of your grocery store questions, so we can get back to the
It's great to
presentation.
have your input, and I need to start washing. I'm sort of a pro-germ kind of person, I guess.
Philosophically, but it means you gotta shop every day if you want a salad every day, or greens every day. Is that true?
Or maybe you could get 3 days' worth instead of a week's worth. Maybe you could get 3 days' worth at the salad
okay.
bar. So let's get back to the slides here. If you do your composting right, it's a great deal better than sending your unused food to a landfill. We have a landfill, in Downers Grove, I checked, our landfill is in Pontiac, 80 miles away. All the landfills in DuPage County were closed many years ago, although they are still producing methane that's collected, but they were closed like 40 years ago. So the one in Pontiac does collect methane, but it takes a while before the methane collection starts. For a year and a half, they have an open cell, they call it, where everything gets dumped like a regular landfill with a drainage and a plastic liner below. Then after a year and a half, they seal it off, and then they can start collecting methane. So if you're composting right, you can have a very small amount of methane produced overall, but it does take some expertise, and I was doing things completely wrong, trying to save some stuff for composting later, and I'm abashed that I did it wrong. So how about some other things in kitchen management? What heating method should you use? By far, microwaving is the most efficient, and it's nice if you can try to avoid using your oven. I discovered that there are recipes for quote-unquote skillet lasagna. You need to be, if you've got a fridge you need to dispose of, you should be very careful to make sure it gets to people who are professional about collecting the refrigerant. And do you really need an extra fridge? If you do need an extra fridge, is it in an efficient location or is it in a hot garage? So think about things like that. So basically, the biggest bang for your buck in terms of trying to reduce your emissions depends on what your current habits are. If you are eating a lot of beef and dairy, especially beef, it sort of goes, reducing beef is sort of reducing beef, reduce beef, reduce beef, reduce beef, then reduce dairy, in terms of the importance. But I was disappointed because I was making a huge amount of my diet out of dairy. Number 2, to reduce waste. Number 3 probably is to compost, and number 4 maybe to educate others. I'm going to skip over some of the other things we could do for a moment and talk about political things, because I don't know how much time we've got. Currently, there's some farming programs and restaurant waste programs that are at risk in terms of the size of their budget, and the Illinois budget is going to be decided this month. I'll get back to that. Some reform could be done with date codes in California. As of next year, they will not be allowed to use Best Buy, and there'll be a standardized, they will not be allowed to use sell by, and there will be codes that will be universally used the same way on all the food sold in California that has a date label. Refrigerant leaks are of a concern. There are new rules, but it's not both international and local, but it's not, not enough is being done to control them. It'd be nice if we had good labeling of what local meant. In Jewel, it means like dates from the Middle East. They just hang them up, buy local in various places. Once I went to them and said, look, this buy local is next to the Middle Eastern dates. What do you have that's sold that's local? And he said, nobody ever asked me that. I said, well, tell me that. And, and this is a few years ago. He found like 4 items. One was in the produce section and didn't have a label saying it was local on it. So, and there were like 2 or 3 other things. None of them actually had a label saying that it was local. Instead, they just have this feel good. We're a good store, so buy local, which means, what do you mean? Buy from the store is what they mean. There's a lot to be done with seafood labeling, and that's a whole nother ballgame. Seafood Watch can help advise about the complexities of where you can get your farm fish so it's not cutting down mangroves or having fish escape and have problems with interbreeding and things. Biogas collection is another one. As I said, they can make with these huge machines, huge gadgets, they can collect methane out of manure. So more detail about the Illinois budget issue. I have with me documents in case people are interested in the Illinois Environmental Coalition, I think it is. The IEC is promoting, that is hoping that people will call and support raising the amount in the Illinois budget for this year for the Illinois Soil Water Conservation Districts and the Fall Covers for Spring Savings program. That Fall Covers for Spring Savings program has to do with helping farmers have cover crops. Very few farmers in Illinois have cover crops. Regenerative farming is beneficial for the environment. It includes often cover crops and not tilling the soil, but for the first 5 years or so, you may have decreased yields, after which you may be able to surpass your neighbors without using much fertilizer. So another bill that they want us to support is one having to do with restaurant waste. So these are things you might want to do. Another issue is refrigerants. Did I mention the Green Chill certification? That is a program by the EPA where individual grocery stores can get certified regarding their leaks of the refrigerant. As I said, the average leak is 25% per year. Some people say higher. I looked up who in Illinois is certified, in our area, is certified with Green Chill. 98% of them were Aldi's. There's only 1 or 2 other stores besides Aldi's. I don't know if all Aldi's are certified, but there were quite a few. There's a gold certification, which means they have systems in place that they can certify that they're leaking no more than 5% of the refrigerant. And there's silver certification, where they can certify that they're leaking no more than 15%. So this is something you could go to your store and say, hey, do you have Green Chill certification? How much are you leaking? If you want to get really in your face with people. So we talked about beef and, whoops, this is not going any further. We've talked about beef and, oh, there we go. Beef and composting waste as the 3 biggest ones, but there's obviously a whole other thing. If you're already not eating beef, you could consider being more vegetarian in your diet, or you could buy from a regenerative farm. Many of the organic farms are. You could avoid food shipped by air, but that's mostly things like, as I said, fragile berries and asparagus in the wintertime. You could consider a home garden. Be careful with your refrigerants. The seafood issue is super complex. I have a piece of paper if you're interested in finding out resources for seafood, but most seafood is better than beef and cheese, and some is much better. The best is bivalves, herring, and sardines. I actually bought some mussels from the store, and I thought they were all right. My pet peeve is shop drinking water. You mentioned plastic bottles. I shipped drinking water. I calculated out that the greenhouse impact of one 500 milliliter bottle of water is equivalent to the greenhouse effect of 8 ounces of nuts. The nice not to use the oven so much, buying local, but those are not quite so clear. And apparently, it seems that canned food is probably a wash because it takes a lot of energy to ship them around, it takes energy to pack them, but then after that, you don't waste them, and you're not dealing with a refrigerant. Perhaps they're better, I don't know. If one person was very disdainful of canned food, but I don't think they were considering the entire impact. So some of the things unfortunately, I found out that chocolate by weight has a high impact. I was very disappointed. I think I promised to talk about some other things. One was which starch has the least. I mean, we're getting down to pretty low. We're getting down to pretty low impact when we're talking about starches as opposed to proteins. But your starch with the least impact is probably potatoes, which actually also have a lot of minerals and are very healthy. And I love to take a potato as is. Oops, did I wash it? Stick a fork in it, put it in the microwave, and then I have a nice snack or light meal with a little salsa or something. So those are some things to consider. Open up to questions.
Let me make sure I get to you with the microphone so our friends at home can hear.
For those of you who want to start composting, the only animal matter that can go into the compost is eggshells, after all the birds drop their shells around. The only thing in the produce matter that you should not is do not put any citrus in, oranges, lemons, limes, etc., because earthworms don't like it.
Is all composting done with worms, or is there some no worm composting that people do here? What? So a lot of people do composting with no worms. Okay. I did hear that there's a certain kind of worm that is used for compost. I don't know if this is still true, but about 10 years ago, I think I read that there's a worm people buy for composting, which you have to be very careful with because it's invasive if you let it loose. I don't know if that's a problem or not.
The Prairie Food Co-op in Lombard will be opening up within a couple of months, and we've been working on it for years, and that's one way to get local food and food in bulk, stuff like that. And when I go to this one Sustain DuPage, they have a recycling area, and the worm composting is a separate bin with more rules. So you can't, like you say, you can't do the citrus, and there's probably other things you can't do too. But
I just wanted to say, as a vegan for 6 years, I feel better. I feel less achy. People ask me all the time, "But where do you get your protein?" And beans, tofu. Any kind of vegetable really has some level of protein. There's, his name is Sam Masekela, the son of Hugh Masekela. He's an endurance athlete. His symbol for his not-for-profit is a rhinoceros. And when he gets that question, he says, "I get it the same place this guy gets it."
I had a slide that I didn't think I had time to show, which is Patrick Bohemian, who's a strongman and vegan who likes to advertise that. And I think, yeah, it's not uncommon for endurance athletes to be vegans.
And their righteous level is much higher, too.
I don't remember the expert I heard on NPR, but she was talking about how the subsidizing the meat industry and then advertising it has convinced the United States people to eat a lot more meat. And we could do the same thing with plant-based food if we could equalize the subsidies in some fashion and then promote it, that people can be influenced by that quite a bit.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in America in particular, and even more recently this bit with a sort of a machismo culture that you somehow have to eat beef in order to be strong, when in fact even whole wheat bread has 7 grams of protein in it.
And you're a vegan or a vegetarian, Brian? Okay. Pescatarian. Okay. These were 2 guys I rode from Chicago to D.C. with, and I didn't realize both of them had very different eating styles than I until we got on the road.
Well, one other thing is I promised to talk about was packaging, and there's not a lot of information out there. So obviously it varies so much from product to product. Much of the packaging we have is actually designed that way because it helps the food last longer. But I did look into aluminum a little bit, because a lot of people say, oh, my drink is aluminum, so it'll just get recycled, so it's fine. Well, half of the aluminum in the country is imported, and it's coming from like bauxite mines where there's a lot of damage done to the environment. So there's so many ways you can be concerned. But if you're wasting food, try not to waste so much food. If you're eating beef, try not to eat quite so much beef. You can individualize it based on what you know. Once you know, you can figure out what might be something you would want to do.
Great. I thought I'd ask a couple of questions, but first I wanted to say this was 47 people I counted in here, which was the most attended Science Sunday we've had this year. So you actually,
well, you did a great
obviously
job advertising,
hit a nerve,
send it out at the last minute to
and we
90
appreciate
people.
that very much. I thought I'd ask, how many people compost in the group here? Just kind of look around and see, okay? How many people eat very limited amounts of beef, would you say? Okay, that's pretty exceptional. So it's fertile ground here, at least, that we're doing some good for the environment. Pat, that was awesome and very well done. I think that there's more follow-ups that we could have next year, and I hope that you're willing and able to talk more about other aspects of this too, because I thought it was very well presented. You knew your topic, obviously, and you gave us a lot of insight. So thank you so much. 2 weeks from today is the Science Slam, and I hope that you can make it. It's always a lot of fun. There's giggles and laughs and fun stuff, and I hope that if you have an opportunity to talk about some small topic, how you paddle a canoe, how anything that you want to talk about is very open for discussion. So thanks so much for coming. Hope you have a great May. This is also the 55th anniversary of the shootings at Kent State. 4 dead in Ohio for political issues that are happening in our world too.